Hello class, George here, and in this video we're going to do sort of, I guess the best way to put it is the standard Hello World type app. But in this case, the app is about learning about the different stages of an Android's activities lifecycle. The idea here being that we're going to look at how an activity persists, when it's paused, when it's stopped, when it's destroyed, when it's created, and so forth. And that's going to be a little bit of a talk. But the first thing we need to do is, of course, start a new project. So let's go to File, New Project. We're going to just call this Lifecycle, not Loof, Lifecycle Test. Company domain I'll keep as that. Hit Next. We are once again doing a phone and tablet. We'll do minimum SDK of Android 15. That's all good. Hit Next. We're going to do an empty activity as usual. Hit Next. And we'll keep this activity as main activity as well. Finish. All right, so with everything up and running, the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about a thing called the manifest. We're not going to dive deep into this video, but I do need to discuss it because we need to talk about a few different things. An activity exists within your application, and you can have multiple activities. And we can start to see how this all works by looking at the manifest, which is basically a list of information that your application provides the Android operating system to describe all the different kinds of capabilities it has, what things it wants to try to use, what activities it has internally, and so forth. And there's a lot of interesting stuff inside the manifest, and there's too much for us to talk about right now, and a lot of it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But you can see it's an XML file, as before. We have an application being defined here, and inside of that, things like the icon that's shown on the launcher, the theme that we're using, which theme is a collection of styles, which are basically a collection of different XML tags describing how an object should look. We then next have an activity being described. And that activity here is called .main_activity. The dot signifies that the location, that is to append the path, the package path here, to the beginning of this right here. So really this is com georgelekakes.lifecycletest.main_activity is the location of it. And we could write that entire thing out if we wanted to, but we have no reason to. Now next to that, we have things called intent filters. This is some vocabulary, and there's a lot of vocabulary in Android that you need to get down. So an intent is something that we want to do. And basically when we decide to do lots of things like launch different activities, like moving from one activity to another, we actually tell an Android activity manager, here's my intent, this is what I would like to do, and we fill in this intent with the information such as what activity we want to launch, and even potentially data that we like to transmit from one side to the other. So we have two sub tags here. The first one is action, and what action is defining is that the main activity here is going to be our main point of entry for this particular application. That's where this is the thing that we should launch when we start this application. The second piece is a category, and that's telling this particular activity that it needs to be added to the Android launcher. Now the launcher, if you're not familiar with it, and the launcher basically is the entire Android user interface, the desktop and the home screen, the launching apps, phone calls, and it's something that by default is pretty much everything you see. Now, hold on a second. We're gonna take a look here. So this is a new application I just downloaded earlier today to try out so I could get my Nexus tablet on here while I'm recording. And the application is called Visor. Now there's a pro version, but right now I'm using the free one, which means that the bit rate's a bit low. But this application's pretty nice, and it's letting me work with my tablet in front of all of you. So here we are. Here's the tablet right here. So here's our, this desktop, our home screen. This is part of the launcher. And when we click on this browser to search through our different apps, we're requesting with that category tag that our app is added to this list. Here, right here, it's kind of blurry, but there's our first app that we created, still loaded up on that device. And here, of course, is everything right there. That main activity was added to the launcher, and now we can launch it. Now, only one activity should be main, and only one activity should be added to the launcher. And then any more activities, which we'll learn about doing later on, will basically be hidden or private to this particular application. Now that's the manifest, and the only reason I brought that up was so you understand that there's the Android operating system, and it's the operating system is launching your application, and within your application are these different activities. And what we've done so far is create an activity. If we go back to the code that's auto-generated to us by Android Studio, here we see our class main activity, and it's extending that app compat activity, so it has backwards compatibility with earlier versions of Android. And we, of course, have this protected void on create. On create isn't the only thing that we have. So our Android activity can be in a series of different states. And what you need to understand is that as you're moving between these different states, different functionality gets called automatically. So our activity is first being created, we have on create, and this is where we set everything up. This is before there's anything actually viewed on the screen at this point. So let's actually go through these really quick over here. So what happens is we have, our entire application, right? And our application has access to what's called a window, which is the area of the screen that it can draw to. Now the window is going to end up being populated by the different views we want to generate in our layouts. And those views, of course, are inflated. The XML versions are inflated and they populate our window. But within an application, we actually have the ability to have multiple activities. So within this, we have, maybe activity 1, activity 2, and so forth. 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter. But the idea is that each one of these activities is encapsulating some sort of an idea. And because we can have multiple activities, they're not all running at the same time. Remember, we're dealing with a very low power, low memory device where our footprints need to be incredibly small. We need to make sure that these activities are running and then they go away or are put into some sort of reserved state as we move from thing to thing. So for instance, our Magic 8-Ball app from before, if we had, looking a little bit nicer, maybe we had a button that we pressed that gave us some kind of information and it took us to a new activity, which is a new fortune page, a new fortune layout. This would be one activity, activity 1. This would be activity 2. This activity would start this other activity and actually does this through an activity manager. And the activity manager is going to be given an intent. And that is, what is our intent here? What do we want to do? Well, our intent is to explicitly create a new activity and have it launch on the screen. We're going to go much deeper into this later. I'm really just trying to get some ground vocabulary down right now so that you understand what's going on. When we decide to launch our app from the launcher, it goes through the same process. So it finds the main activity. So let's say activity 1 in that manifest was defined as being the main activity. When we click on that icon, this activity has to be created, and it's going to follow through a series of steps. The first step that we need to worry about, and is the one we've already seen, is on create. Now, all of these are going to be protected, and they're also going to be return type of void. Now, after on create, this is where there's literally nothing being shown on the screen yet. This is where we define the layout. It's where we grab references to things. It's where we basically it's an initialization step. It's as close as we get to having a constructor in this particular way of coding. Now, I had mentioned that we have different states in Android for our application. Our device can be running, our device can be paused, or our device can be stopped. And as we move from each of these different segments, different methods are going to be called automatically by Android. And you have the ability to write your own overridden versions of these to handle any kind of bookkeeping and checking of things that are necessary. So we have on create is number 1. And actually, let's shift F5, clear the screen. So we have the main one, which is on create. Next up, we're going to go to on start. This is when our app is just about to become visible. Next up, after that, we have on resume. And now at this point, our application is visible. After on resume, we have different directions that we can go into. So for instance, let's say that our application has a button, and that button causes a new window to pop up. And this one gets kind of grayed out, the one behind it, because it's no longer active. This means the previous activity is actually going to be paused. So what we have is an on pause method that we get to call. On pause means that the activity is still visible, but it is no longer the user's main focus. So we go from on resume to on pause, and if on pause ends, we'll go back to on resume. However, if after being paused, the user does something like, I don't know, maybe presses some sort of a back button or the home screen or whatnot, we're going to go to on stop. Now, on stop is a little bit more serious. And what you need to understand is that any time Android can nuke our app. Literally, it might realize that our memory is running low, and with the memory running low, it needs to kill this app because you've decided to move away from it. This isn't the user's focus anymore. I need to spend resources on what the user is currently working on. Therefore, I may kill this app after on pause or on stop. So with on pause, this is where we usually want to save the state of our app so that we don't lose anything. After on stop, we have on destroy. And this is where our app is basically cleared from memory. We're done at this point. On destroy, if we want to go back, has to start all the way back up again on create. And if we had any data, that data is lost. This happens when you rotate the device. Your activity is destroyed and it's recreated. And we need to, if we want to have persistence between rotating that, we need to save some sort of data off. And we'll be dealing with that in a future video. But I want you to understand on create, on start, on resume, and then on pause. Now with on stop, there's actually another in between on stop and on start. And that's on restart. It's not mentioned as much typically in documentation, but it is there. And that's it. What we want to do is create an application that's going to expose these different changes happening. And we're just going to basically do a log.d method call. And the log is a wonderful method of us to push out system information. So if we come down here we have our logcat. I'll clear it. Right now I have my Nexus attached and any kind of data. Actually, let's turn it on and get this thing to flood some things. So here, an app I had made called Train Tracks, but here we can see it's pushing out all kinds of information. We can use this log to push out different levels of information to this logcat: verbose, debug, info, warn, error, and assert. Right now we're going to be working with debug. So we've done enough now. Let's actually start making something. So over here, let's open up our main activity. Now on create was already created for us. And while you could, if you want to help memorize things, go ahead and, override. We could type this out manually. Protected, void, on, resume, for instance. We could do this, but it's tedious and there's a lot of information to remember. So let's right click on generate. And what we want to do is create override methods. And this is a list of all the different methods that we can override through our app compat activity class. And as you go down here, you'll see far more of them as we go down. So what we want to do is find start, on stop, on destroy, on restart, and hit OK. And there it added start, stop, destroy, and restart. Now it looks like I missed one. I missed pause. So let's go find that one. Right click, generate, override, and let's just start typing on pause. There we are, on pause. Okay. And it filled it in for us. So much easier to use the generate and not have to type that all out. Very important though is the fact that not only did it put in everything, it also did a call to the parent class, the super.onStart for each of these. And this is incredibly necessary. It's 100% required to do this first on the onCreate. On some of the other ones though, you can get away with not calling it first, but it's still always a good idea to call these things first before you do anything else. Now this app is going to literally do almost nothing. All it's going to do is start spitting out information to us. So if we go to our main layout, close that, all we have is literally something that says hello world. And quite frankly, that's fine. We don't need it to do anything else. We're going to be monitoring instead the logcat down here to see what information gets pulled out. When you're going to do a debug.log, well, let's start with one, right? So here's on create. So let's do log.d, and here it's requesting, there's two versions of the function signature or method signature. There is one that takes a string tag and a string message, and then one that also takes a throwable if we want to put out stack information, which is good for debugging things. We're going to use the first one for right now, so log.d. Now we want to use a tag. And this tag can be used to filter out information inside of logcat, so we're not looking at all of the information across every app, because that's what you're getting. You're getting information from everything on the system, and a lot of times it's overwhelming. So let's create, the standard convention really is to create a static final, is a protected static final string, and we'll call this tag. We're going to set this equal to the entire name of this thing. So that would be com.george lecakes.lifecycle test.app.main activity. This tag we're going to use to filter things out later on. So put the tag first, and then we're just going to write a string. Just say on create. So here we're getting an error from Android. Apparently I made my tag too long. The tags can only be 23 characters in length. So let's reduce this a bit. Get rid of that part of it. That should do a lot fewer. And I'm just going to shorten this down to glcakes.main activity. That should be pretty good. So that works. We're going to copy this line and do this for each. And now all we need to do is actually launch this application and watch Logcat down here. But instead of using just Logcat right here, why don't we go ahead into the device monitor. There we are. So we can see our device right there. The two apps currently going on. Let's go ahead and get rid of that one. And let's get rid of, let's bring this up so you can see what I'm actually doing. Uh-oh. Didn't like that. Let's launch Visor and see if that's going to fix this. All right, let's close Visor and start it back up again and see if that's going to fix things. I'm wondering if I can't do Visor at the same time as everything else that I'm working on. It's probably very possible. Here you can see all this kind of information. You saw Visor information there for a second. There we are. Let's go home now. Come over here. Perfect. And let's go ahead and launch this application. But first, we want to create a filter because right now we have verbose, but that's verbose on every single app. That's like everything. We're doing a debug, so we can get rid of that. That's what the log.d does. And we can go ahead and clear all that information. Now over here we have filters. Let's click on the plus. And we can call it a filter name if we want to. And we can just call this, our app is, let's find the tag. Let's grab this tag right here. What's our activity called? We'll do this, filter name. So we're going to filter by the log tag, which is that first element we put right there. And the logging level is going to be debug. Hit OK. No information's coming in at the moment. Come back over here. Let's go ahead and hit run. Choose my Android HTC Nexus 9 device. Let's see what happens. Looks like I got a little bit of an error. Before I started this, instant run requires tools Android enable ADB integration to be enabled. So let's do that. Tools Android enable ADB integration. I had just upgraded my entire system to a new version. So a little bit of problems popping up. Let's see if we can get past these though. You'll run into these things as well as you're doing your work. Oh, and of course we lost the screen over there again. I'll try to get that back. Here we are installing the APK down here. See if we can view what's going on as well at the same time. Come on over here. Wait for this to not look horrible. Lifecycle test, we'll click on that. Here's Hello World. Now what's important down here is for us to be using our filters to search for things. So let's go over to Logcat. Make sure that we select our filter. And here we can see we have on create, on start, on pause, on stop, on restart, on start again. So that's right here with it looking the way it is. What I'm going to do is actually rotate the device now to the side. And we can see that rotating the device has passed us through all of those different phases again. Let's actually clear this. Let me do that again so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to rotate. So the app was paused, stopped, and then destroyed. And then we had a create and another start occur. Now if I hit the home button, we'll see, clear that out again. I'm going to go to my lifecycle test. I brought it back. When I pressed the home button means I will probably want to be coming back to this app. Back button usually means destroy this app, I'm done with it. So by pressing the home button, we only stop the app, which is why we ended up with a restart and then a start. Now if I press the back button instead, not only does it pause it, it stops it and has now destroyed that app. And the app will have to be completely recreated at the start. This is one reason why when we were rotating devices and rotating them back and doing different things to them, that we were basically losing all kinds of information about how things were working because the app was completely destroyed. And unless we take the time to package data away in a saved instance state and reload that when the application is recreated, we're going to lose all that information. And that's actually something we're going to be looking at in just a few videos, because the video after this is where we create our first app that's actually going to have multiple activities we are going to be spawning. And we're going to need to make sure that we can send data from one side, from one activity to another, and then return data backwards between those two. So I'll see you in that video. Thanks again, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. So long. Bye.